Imagine December 1972. The commander of the last lunar mission, Apollo 17, Eugene Cernan, stands on the surface of the moon. He looks at the Earth hanging in the black void and speaks his farewell words. At that moment, he and all of humanity were sure that we were leaving for a short time, that a couple of years would pass and we would return to build bases, cities, and laboratories there. But 50 years have passed. The surface of our satellite remained untouched. No one disturbed the peace of the mare Imbrium, and dust slowly settled on the tracks left by the lunar rovers. And all this time, we were tormented by the same question. Why? Why did the most powerful nation in the world, which invested a sum equal to hundreds of billions of modern dollars in the lunar race, suddenly turn off the lights and leave? Why were the Saturn V rockets, capable of carrying colossal payloads, sent to rot in museums and the blueprints put away in distant archives? People love mysteries, and that is precisely why conspiracy theories flourished. We were told that the astronauts met someone there they shouldn't have met, that they were threatened and told not to return. They spoke of ancient ruins on the dark side, of secret bases, of Nazis who escaped Earth. These stories sell perfectly. They are breathtaking. But the truth, which has only begun to surface now, turns out to be much more prosaic, yet thousands of times more expensive than any science fiction. We didn't return because we were afraid of aliens. We didn't return because back then, in the 70s, we simply didn't understand what exactly we had found. We were looking at the main treasure of the solar system, but we saw only dirty, gray dust. The United States of America found something on the moon that is capable of completely resetting the global economy. They found a resource that could destroy the value of oil, gas, and coal, a substance worth approximately $3 billion per ton. And the moon is literally soaked in it. Today, we are going on a journey through time and space. We will crack open old NASA reports that have gathered dust for half a century. We will disassemble, atom by atom, the very soil that Armstrong and Aldrin brought back in their pockets. We will find out why China is spending incredible funds right now to land its devices on the far side of the satellite, and why the new lunar race will not be a competition for prestige, but a brutal war for energy. To understand the depth of this story, we need to return to the laboratories of Houston immediately after the triumphant return of the first Apollo expeditions. The astronauts brought back 382 kilograms of moon rocks and sand. Regolith. Scientists pounced on these samples like hungry predators. The entire scientific world held its breath. They were waiting for sensations. They were looking for traces of water, traces of organic life, some incredible crystals that do not exist on Earth. But the initial analysis brought bitter disappointment. The moon seemed to be an absolutely dead, dry desert. The chemical composition of the soil turned out to be painfully boring and banal. Silicon, iron, aluminum, titanium, magnesium. Yes, these are useful metals, but transporting them from the moon is economic madness. The cost of delivering 1 kilogram of cargo to orbit in those days cost more than a gold bar of the same weight. No aluminum could pay for such expenses. The reports contained dry, emotionless phrases. The samples are of interest for planetary geology, but have no industrial value. The moon received the humiliating status of a giant, useless boulder. It was this verdict that killed the interest of politicians. Why spend trillions flying to a dead rock if there is nothing there but radioactive dust? The program was shut down. But in this story, there was one tiny, almost unnoticeable nuance that was overlooked. Among the scientists studying these rocks were not only geologists, but also nuclear physicists. And while the geologists were bored sorting through basalt, the physicists began to notice strange anomalies in the mass spectrometer data. The soil was strangely saturated with gases. It turns out that the Moon, which has no atmosphere or magnetic field, works like a giant cosmic sponge. For billions of years, it has been under a harsh, continuous bombardment of solar wind. Our Sun is not just a yellow lantern, it is a giant thermonuclear reactor that spews billions of tons of charged particles, protons, electrons, and helium nuclei, into space every second. On Earth, we are protected by a powerful magnetic field, and these particles burn up in the upper layers of the atmosphere, creating beautiful auroras. We are under an umbrella. But on the Moon, there is no umbrella. The solar wind slams into the surface at tremendous speed, and the particles literally get stuck, embedded in the crystal lattice of the upper layer of soil. The Moon has been soaking up this pure star energy for 4.5 billion years. And then, in the mid-80s, when analysis technologies became an order of magnitude more precise, scientists from the University of Wisconsin made a discovery that forced them to double-check their equipment 3 times. They discovered an incredibly high concentration of an isotope in lunar samples that practically does not exist on Earth. It was helium-3. On our planet, helium is the gas used to inflate balloons for parties. That is helium-4. It is inert, safe, and generally boring. But its younger brother, helium-3, is a completely different story. It has only 1 neutron in its nucleus instead of 2. And it is this missing neutron that makes it the most desirable substance in the universe for future energy. On Earth, helium-3 is negligibly scarce. It is obtained literally by the gram, waiting for the decay of tritium in nuclear warheads. The entire world reserve that humanity has managed to scrape together in half a century is measured in kilograms, not tons. The price per gram reaches insane values. But there, on the Moon, in the top layer of dust, there are millions of tons of it. It lies right under your feet. You don't need to drill deep shafts. You don't need to blow up rocks. Grab an excavator and dig. And that's when the puzzle came together. The Moon is not a dead stone. The Moon is a giant charged solar battery waiting for us to fly in and plug in a cable. But why exactly did helium-3 cause such a frenzy among scientists and the military? Why is China building new spaceports for it, and private companies like SpaceX dreaming of giant rockets? It's not about balloons. It's about a dream that physicists have cherished for 70 years. It's about controlled thermonuclear fusion. All our nuclear energy today is built on the principle of decay. We take heavy, unstable, dangerous uranium atoms and break them apart. This releases heat, but leaves a huge pile of radioactive waste that will radiate for thousands of years and poison everything living. It is dirty, it is risky, and it is always the threat of a new Chernobyl or Fukushima. Thermonuclear fusion is the reverse process. It is how our Sun and all the stars in the universe work. We take light atoms and collide them so hard that they merge into a new one. This releases a colossal amount of energy, millions of times more than burning oil. This is the holy grail of physics. Infinite energy without explosions, without smoke, and without radiation. But there is one huge fundamental problem that prevents us from building a sun on Earth. To ignite a star in a laboratory, we need fuel. The classic scheme that is currently being attempted in all experimental reactors in the world, for example at ITER, uses deuterium and tritium. These are heavy isotopes of hydrogen. But this reaction has a dark side. When deuterium and tritium merge, a crazy neutron flies out of the nucleus. It flies at tremendous speed, pierces the reactor walls, makes them radioactive, and literally destroys the equipment from the inside in a matter of months. This is the main brake on progress. We can start the reaction for seconds, but it destroys the installation itself. And here, our main hero enters the stage: lunar helium-3. If we replace tritium with helium-3, real physical magic happens. When they merge with deuterium, no neutrons fly out at all. This reaction is called a neutronic. All energy is released in the form of charged protons. And protons are a miracle because they have a positive charge. They can be caught with a magnetic field and turned directly into electricity, bypassing the stage of heating water. We don't need steam turbines. We don't need to boil water like in the 19th century. The efficiency of such a reactor will not be 30%, like at nuclear power plants now, but 70 or even 80. This is God-tier technology. Just 200 tons of helium-3 is enough to provide energy for the entire United States of America for a whole year. Think about that figure: 200 tons. That is the payload capacity of just 2 heavy rockets, 2 flights, and the energy crisis, oil wars, atmospheric pollution. All of this becomes history. Chinese scientists have calculated that the reserves of helium-3 on the moon are enough for all of humanity at our current insane consumption for at least 10,000 years. This is not just a resource. This is absolute power. Whoever learns to transport this gas from the moon and burn it in reactors first will become the ruler of the world. They will crash oil markets. They will make their goods dirt cheap. They will dictate terms to everyone else. That is why we see the rhetoric of world leaders changing. In the 90s, people joked about the moon. In the 2000s, they talked about pure science and flags. And now, in the documents of the White House, the Kremlin, and Beijing, the word development sounds more and more often. Not study. Development? This is a legal and economic term that means industrial exploitation and mining. But if everything is so cool, a logical question arises. Why aren't we there yet? Why don't we see caravans of ships flying to the satellite? Because there is a second mystery, a problem that breaks the whole beautiful picture, and that has stopped us for half a century. Mining helium-3 is hellish, titanic labor. The concentration of gas in the soil is very low. To get 1 ton of pure isotope, you need to dig up, sift, and heat to 600 degrees, approximately 100 million tons of lunar soil. Imagine a quarry the size of a small European country. We need giant harvesters, huge processing plants, powerful energy right there on the moon. In the 70s, this was physically impossible. We didn't have robots. We didn't have artificial intelligence that could control this swarm of machines without human participation. But today, the situation has changed. Technology has finally caught up with our ambitions. And most importantly, helium-3 is not the only treasure we found there. When scientists started double-checking data from new generation satellites, they found something that made their jaws drop. Something that shouldn't be on the moon in principle. Something that changes the entire logic of colonization and makes it possible not in the distant future, but tomorrow. We found water, and not just drops. We found entire oceans of ice. For a long time, it was believed that the moon was as dry as a bone. No water was found in the Apollo samples, and this became scientific dogma for 40 years. But in 2009, NASA decided to go all in and conducted a daring experiment. They directed the Centaur rocket booster straight into the Cabeus crater on the moon's south pole. It was a real bombardment for scientific purposes. The rocket slammed into the bottom of the dark crater at tremendous speed, raising a column of dust 10 kilometers high. Following it flew a special satellite that flew through this cloud, and scanned its composition. And the instruments just went crazy. It turned out that in eternal shadow, at the bottom of polar craters where sunlight hasn't looked for billions of years, lies ice. Ordinary, dirty water ice mixed with soil. And there is a lot of it there. According to the most modest estimates, hundreds of billions of tons. Why does this discovery change everything? Because water in space is not just an opportunity to drink. Water is H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen is what we will breathe. Hydrogen is the most efficient rocket fuel in the universe. The presence of water means we don't need to bring fuel from Earth for the return trip. We don't need to bring giant tanks of air with us. The moon ceases to be a summer house where you have to bring everything, from water to firewood and food. It becomes a self-sufficient base. We can build a plant right on the edge of the crater, mine ice, split it into fuel, and refuel the ships that will carry that very helium-3 to Earth. This reduces the cost of the entire project tenfold. The moon turns into a giant space gas station, a springboard for a jump further, to Mars and other planets. And that's not all. Titanium was discovered in lunar soil. Moreover, in some areas, its concentration is 10 times higher than in the richest deposits on Earth. And lunar titanium is special. It is already in the right chemical form. It is easier to mine and process. You can build ship hulls, stations, and tools from it. There is aluminum, iron, silicon for solar panels. In essence, the moon is a ready-made construction supermarket where goods are just lying on the shelves and there are no security guards. Not yet. But there is one small detail that diplomats try not to talk about out loud. But it is precisely this detail that could become the cause of the first space conflict. The fact is that the sweet spots on the moon are very limited. Helium-3 is smeared over the surface more or less evenly. But water exists only at the poles. And the most convenient craters, where there is both water at the bottom and eternal sunlight on the upper rim for solar panels, you can count them on one hand. These are the so-called peaks of eternal light, unique geographical points. Whoever places their base on such a peak will control the entire region. They will get energy, water, and ideal communication with Earth. And guess who has already targeted these points? While we are discussing the past, a real drama is already unfolding in space. The Chinese lunar program is moving by leaps and bounds. They were the first in history to land a device on the far side of the moon. Why? Because, according to some data, helium-3 deposits there are even richer and purer than on the visible side. The USA responded with the Artemis program. The goal is to return man to the moon and create a permanent base precisely at the South Pole. A coincidence? Of course not. The South Pole is the new Middle East. It is the place where the fates of the world will be decided for the next 100 years. But let's distract ourselves from politics and remember one more riddle left to us by Apollo. In November 1969, the crew of Apollo 12 conducted a strange experiment on the moon, the results of which NASA could not explain for a very long time. After the astronauts returned to the orbital ship, they deliberately crashed the spent lunar module ascent stage back onto the surface. This iron structure, weighing 2.5 tons, slammed into the ground at a speed of 6,000 kilometers per hour. Scientists on Earth were waiting for the impact. They installed highly sensitive seismographs there to listen to how the lunar crust trembles, to understand what is inside. They expected to see a short spike, as happens with an earthquake. Impact, decaying waves, silence. All this should have taken a couple of minutes. But what the recorders drew plunged seismologists into a state of shock. The moon rang. It vibrated, hummed, and rang like a giant bell. And this ringing did not subside for a minute, nor 10 minutes. It lasted more than an hour. The moon behaved not like a dense rocky planet, but like a hollow metal sphere. It was this moment that spawned the most popular conspiracy theory that the moon is an artificial object, an ancient alien ship covered in the dust of ages. Beautiful? Very. But reality, as we found out recently, is even more interesting and, most importantly, useful for us. It's not about aliens, it's about the fact that the moon is phenomenally dry and monolithic. On Earth, our depths are full of water, liquid magma, faults. When an impact occurs, this mush quickly dampens the sound. The moon, however, is a solid, cold, rigid stone. The impact energy has nowhere to go, and it travels throughout the entire sphere, reflecting off the walls. What does this mean for us, future colonists? It means the moon is much more stable than we thought. There are no plate tectonics. There will be no sudden destructive moonquakes that split our base in half. It is an ideal, immovable foundation. But living on the surface of the moon is tantamount to signing your own death warrant. There is no atmosphere. During the day, the temperature rises to 120 degrees Celsius, melting rubber and plastic, and at night it drops to minus 170. Plus severe radiation, plus micrometeorites that fly at the speed of a bullet and are capable of piercing a spacesuit right through. Building domes of glass and concrete, as in science fiction, is stupid and dangerous. The very first powerful solar flare will kill all personnel in a couple of minutes. And here, the moon throws us a gift again. A gift that we only discerned in the 2010s with the help of the Japanese probe Kaguya and the American LRO apparatus. We found entrances to the underground. In satellite images, scientists noticed strange black holes. Not craters from meteorite impacts, but specifically holes with vertical walls going deep down. It turned out that giant tunnels stretch beneath the surface of the moon. Lava tubes. Billions of years ago, when the moon was still hot and volcanically active, rivers of lava flowed there. On top, the lava cooled and was covered with a hard crust, but inside it continued to flow. When the volcano turned off, the lava left, leaving empty pipes behind. The scale of these tunnels boggles the imagination. On Earth, such caves have a diameter of 10 to 20 meters. On the moon, due to low gravity, these tunnels reach widths of several kilometers. In one such tube in the Marius Hills region, you could easily fit an entire metropolis the size of Philadelphia, or the historic center of Moscow. These are ready-made natural bunkers. A thick layer of basalt ceiling perfectly protects against cosmic radiation, meteorites, and wild temperature changes. Inside these tubes, there is always a constant temperature, about minus 20 degrees. For space, this is a real resort. We don't need to build walls. We just need to inflate airtight tents there and live. Imagine this picture. Huge underground cities, illuminated by soft artificial light, where people live, work, grow plants, mine helium-3, and send it to the surface. This is not fiction. This is an engineering plan that architects are already working on. But as soon as we understand that the moon is not just a lifeless stone, but a giant warehouse of energy resources, an ideal natural fortress, and a ready-made base for expansion, the main, most uncomfortable and dangerous question arises. A question over which diplomats and generals in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow are currently tense. Whose moon is it anyway? Who has the right to dig quarries and build factories there? In 1967, at the height of the Cold War, the world's leading powers signed the Outer Space Treaty. This document is still considered the sacred cow of international space law. It is written there in black and white. No celestial body, including the moon, can be appropriated by any country by means of proclaiming sovereignty, occupation, or by any other means. Simply put, you cannot fly in, stick your flag in, and say, "This is the territory of the United States," or "These are the lands of the People's Republic of China." The moon belongs to all humanity. Sounds very noble, doesn't it? True communism on the scale of the universe. But there is one problem. This treaty was written half a century ago when no one seriously thought about industrial mining. Lawyers of those years thought about ensuring no one placed nuclear missiles on the moon. They thought about war, not business. And now, when trillions of dollars are at stake, this old treaty is starting to burst at the seams. The USA in 2020 made a very clever legal move. They invited their partners to sign the so-called Artemis Accords. At first glance, it's all about peace and friendship. But if you read closely, there is a very interesting point about safety zones. The logic of American lawyers is this: okay, we don't own the land under our base. We honor the Treaty of '67. But we have a right to the safety of our operations. Therefore, around our base and our mines, we draw a circle, say, with a radius of 50 kilometers, where no one is allowed to enter, so as to accidentally not interfere with our complex scientific work and kick up dust. Do you sense the catch? If you place your base on the most tasty crater with water and declare everything around it a safety zone, you de facto seize this territory for sole use. You don't call it ownership, but you don't let anyone in, and you pump resources. China and Russia reacted instantly to this, calling the Artemis Accords an attempt at hidden privatization of the moon. In response, China is actively promoting its own independent project of the International Lunar Research Station, and also does not intend to share the best spots. We are standing on the threshold of the first interplanetary land conflict in human history. It resembles the Wild West during the Gold Rush. There is a law, but the sheriff is far away. Whoever rode to the creek first, whoever built a fence and posted guards first, survived and became rich. And the stakes in this game are rising every day. Because whoever controls the moon gets not only energy and money, they get the high ground. In military strategy, there is a fundamental concept of commanding heights. Whoever sits on the mountain always defeats the one in the lowlands. On the scale of the Earth and near-Earth space, the moon is the highest and most impregnable mountain. Earth's gravity well is very deep. To launch just 1 kilogram of payload from the Earth's surface into orbit, we need to burn tons of fuel. Every time, we struggle to climb out of this gravitational pit. But launching something from the moon to Earth is very easy and cheap. Gravity there is 6 times weaker, and there is no atmosphere to hinder acceleration at all. You can use not expensive chemical rockets, but electromagnetic catapults, so-called mass drivers. These are long rails along which a container is accelerated and simply shot towards Earth. It will fly there itself. Our planet's gravity will do the rest of the work and pull the cargo in. And here begins the darkest and most frightening part of our story. The same technology that will allow us to cheaply deliver helium-3 to save the environment could become the most terrifying weapon in history. Imagine an ordinary stone block or a tungsten rod weighing several tons. If you drop it from the moon, it will fall to Earth, accelerating more and more. Upon entering the atmosphere, its speed will be about 10 kilometers per second. This is monstrous kinetic energy. Upon impact with the surface, this slug needs no explosives. The impact itself will be equal in power to the explosion of a tactical nuclear bomb. This is called kinetic bombardment, or, as the military rarely calls it, rods from God. The advantages of such a weapon are obvious to generals. No radioactive contamination of the area, No violation of treaties banning nuclear weapons in space, because it's just a piece of metal. And the scariest part, no modern or even prospective missile defense system can intercept a rock flying vertically downwards at such wild speed. Control over the moon is the ability to hold the entire planet at gunpoint at once. It is an absolute, ideal sword of Damocles. Whoever has a base on the moon dictates their will to those who remain below. Countries understand this perfectly. The creation of the US Space Force, similar closed structures in China. All this is preparation not for holiday parades, but for the harsh protection of their interests up there. Therefore, the next time you hear in the news that another lunar probe crashed into the surface due to a software glitch, or that the launch of a super-heavy rocket was postponed again, know this: it is not just a scientific failure or a technical problem. It is a lost battle in an invisible Cold War that is already in full swing. But let's come down from the heavens to Earth, or rather, return to the most important question. All this, helium-3, military bases, underground cities in lava tubes, sounds incredibly cool. But how realistic is this for you and me, as a biological species? Maybe these are just beautiful pictures to extract budgets from Congress? We are approaching the culmination of our investigation, because the main obstacle to colonization may not be politics, not economics, and not even radiation. The obstacle may be our biology itself. Can a human survive on the moon for a long time without turning into an invalid? Or are our bodies, created by evolution for life on Earth, simply incompatible with life outside our planet? Recent months-long experiments on the International Space Station have shown rather frightening results. What happens to the human body and brain in conditions of altered gravity and total isolation? We start to break. We evolved for millions of years in Earth's gravity. Every cell of our body, every blood vessel, every bone is tuned to 1G overload. The moon is 1/6 G. When the Apollo astronauts jumped around in the lunar dust, it looked fun and amusing. But they were there for only a couple of days. But what if you stay there for a year? For 5 years? For a lifetime? Doctors on the ISS see the body starting to lose ground. Muscles, feeling no load, atrophy instantly. Bones, realizing they don't need to carry a heavy body, begin to lose calcium and become brittle as glass. Fluid in the body redistributes, rushes to the head, presses on the eyeballs, and astronauts begin to lose their sight. The heart, which no longer needs to pump blood up against gravity, gets lazy, shrinks in size, and weakens. Gravity exists on the moon, but it is too weak. Scientists seriously fear that children born on a lunar base will never, under any circumstances, be able to visit Earth. Their weak skeleton will simply break under the weight of their own body upon landing on our planet. Their heart will stop from the overload. We risk creating a new biological species of humans. Lunatics, in the most direct, biological sense of the word. People who will be locked on their celestial island forever, separated from the rest of humanity by an impassable gravitational barrier. And this inevitably creates a deep social and philosophical rift. Over time, the inhabitants of lunar colonies, these new people, will cease to consider themselves Earthlings. They will have their own unique culture, their own values, their own interests. And, considering that they will hold Earth's energy switch, helium-3 supplies, and a strategic kinetic advantage in their hands, will they want to obey the decrees of distant officials from offices in New York or Geneva? Our entire history teaches us that rich and distant colonies always, sooner or later, strive for independence. America rebelled against Britain over tea taxes. Imagine what the moon might rebel over if Earth demands more and more cheap energy and gives only orders in return. The Earth versus Moon scenario is not just a plot for sci-fi books and video games. It is a very real social model of a future conflict that futurists and military analysts are calculating right now. But there is another, more optimistic and noble view of our lunar future. The moon could become our main life preserver. And we are not just talking about energy. It could become our backup, our archive. You have probably heard about the famous Doomsday Vault in Svalbard, where seeds of all the world's plants are stored in the ice in case of nuclear war or global catastrophe. The idea is excellent, but Svalbard is still Earth. It is vulnerable to climate, war, tectonics. Scientists propose creating on the moon, in those very protected lava tubes, a full backup copy of Earth's biosphere. DNA samples of all animals, all plants, fungi, bacteria frozen in liquid nitrogen, and possibly the digitized knowledge of all humanity. The moon is dead, cold, and static. It is an ideal eternal refrigerator. If something happens to Earth, a giant asteroid hits, a supervolcano wakes up, a deadly pandemic begins, the moon will preserve the source code of life. It is our insurance policy, a real Noah's Ark that does not float on waves, but flies in a vacuum above us. But if you think that the main threat comes only from states and their armies, you are missing the most dangerous player. A player who has no flag, no anthem, and no moral restrictions linked to international treaties. We are talking about private megacorporations. We are used to seeing Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos as dreamers who want to save humanity. But let's look at the situation cynically, through the eyes of economics. Mining helium-3 is a business with a potential profit in the quadrillions of dollars. Such money always, without exception, attracts people with a shark's grip. And the history of the East India Company, which once owned a private army stronger than that of the British Empire, could repeat itself in space. Imagine the near future. The year 2040. There is not one NASA base on the moon, but dozens of private outposts. Companies formally registered in Luxembourg or the Cayman Islands send their hired workers there. Legally, the moon is no man's land. The labor code does not apply there. There are no police. No one will hear if a worker complains about working conditions. We risk getting a revival of the harshest forms of exploitation bordering on slavery. A person who signed a contract and flew to the moon becomes a hostage. He cannot quit and go home because there is a vacuum around, and a ticket to Earth costs millions. The corporation controls his air, his food, his life. This is the ideal environment for the birth of cyberpunk in real life, where lunar miners will be forced to pay the company even for an extra breath of oxygen. Moreover, competition between corporations on Earth is resolved in courts. On the moon, in a distant crater where there are no surveillance cameras, competition may be resolved by sabotage. A damaged airlock at a neighbor's, an accidentally severed power cable, a hacked life support system. These are ways to eliminate competitors that are impossible to prove. We are entering the era of corporate space wars, where private security firms will guard the perimeter not from aliens, but from spies of a neighboring company. And the weapons used there will be the most sophisticated. Not firearms, in the station's oxygen atmosphere, they are too dangerous, but lasers, tasers, and infrasonic weapons. But let's dig even deeper, into the mining technology itself, because that's where the devil hides. I said earlier that to extract helium-3, millions of tons of soil need to be processed. What will this look like physically? We are talking about machines the size of an aircraft carrier, giant harvesters crawling across the Mare Tranquillitatis, stripping the top layer of the lunar crust. They will swallow regolith, heat it in their bellies to 600 degrees Celsius, squeeze the gas out of it, and spit out the spent rock behind. This is called reverse terraforming. We will literally destroy the lunar landscape that humans have seen for millennia. The famous man in the moon, those dark spots we see from Earth, will be dug up, pitted with quarries, and piled with heaps of waste rock. Ecologists who are currently protecting the Amazon forests are horrified by the prospects. The moon is an irreplaceable natural monument, and we are preparing to turn it into a giant industrial zone visible to the naked eye from Earth. At night, we will see not soft light, but factory lights and welding flashes. The romance will disappear forever. In addition, the process of heating the soil will cause the release not only of helium-3, but also of other gases: hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. Scientists warn that large-scale mining could create a temporary, artificial atmosphere of dust and gas around the moon. This sounds not bad, but in fact, it is a disaster for astronomy. The moon has always been an ideal place for telescopes. No atmosphere, no distortion. If we dust it up, we blind ourselves. We lose the ability to see deep space for the sake of warming Earth. That is the price that will have to be paid. Now let's talk about what happens on Earth when the first tanker with helium-3 lands and unloads. Economists call this abundance shock. Imagine that energy suddenly became almost free. Electricity bills disappeared. Gasoline is no longer needed. Desalination of seawater became dirt cheap, meaning no water shortages in Africa. Deserts can be turned into gardens. Sounds like paradise, right? But this metal has a flip side. Countries whose economies depend on oil and gas exports, the Middle East, Russia, Venezuela, will instantly lose their source of income. Their currencies will collapse, hyperinflation, riots, and likely civil wars will begin. The global balance of power will collapse overnight. The geopolitical map of the world will be redrawn. Whoever holds the helium-3 tap will decide who gets cheap energy and who is left in the Middle Ages. We could get a world split into two castes: helium gods, living in abundance, and hydrocarbon outcasts, living out their days in poverty. The transition to the new era will not be smooth. It will be bloody. And don't forget the military aspect we started talking about. Space forces are already a reality. But what will a war on the moon look like? It won't be Star Wars with blasters. It will be a war of drones and cyber attacks. A hacker sitting in a bunker in Nevada or Shanghai can intercept control of an enemy base's life support system and simply cut off their oxygen, or turn off the heating system. Death on the moon will be quiet and terrible. People will simply fall asleep and not wake up. Or, conversely, the reactor cooling system will be hacked, and the base will turn into a nuclear mushroom cloud. The vulnerability of lunar settlements to terrorism is colossal. Any madman with access to the code can take thousands of people hostage. Therefore, lunar bases will be the most guarded and totalitarian places in the universe. Total surveillance, control of every word, every breath. Freedom is a luxury no one on the moon will be able to afford for the sake of survival. Another aspect that few think about is biological contamination. We talked about hiding an archive of Earth life on the moon. But what if we bring our diseases there? Viruses and bacteria mutate in space. Under the influence of radiation, the common flu, or E. coli, can turn into something we have no cure for. In the closed ventilation system of a lunar station, an epidemic will spread in hours. And this raises the question of quarantine. Returning from the moon to Earth will not be simple. Every person, every container of helium will have to undergo rigorous sterilization. We could get a situation where the moon becomes a leper island, from where return is forbidden if there is even the slightest suspicion of infection. But let's look even further, to the event horizon. Helium-3 is fuel, and ships can be refueled with water from lunar ice. This means the moon becomes a shipyard. Building huge ships on Earth is unprofitable. They are heavy to lift. But on the moon, with its weak gravity, we can build cruisers kilometers long. We can build arcs to fly to other stars. And here, the craziest theory of futurists is born. The moon could become a launch pad for humanity's departure. Not colonization, but specifically flight. If we finally ruin the climate on Earth, if a nuclear winter begins, the elite will move there. Not into bunkers underground, but to a celestial Elysium. The moon could become a home for the rich and chosen, who will look down on the dying, overpopulated, poisoned Earth. The technologies we develop there will allow creating an ideal, sterile world with an artificial climate, better medicine, and life extension. The gap between Earth and the moon could become a gap between a dying past and an eternal future. And a ticket to this arc will cost more than a soul. On the other hand, there are transhumanist philosophers who see this as the next step in evolution. They say, man is not a body, man is a mind. Lunar conditions are ideal for cyborgization. If your body weakens from low gravity, replace it. Mechanical limbs, artificial organs, direct neural interfaces. On the moon, people will merge with machines faster. A race of cyborgs will be born there, who are not afraid of a vacuum, who do not need air. They will become true children of the cosmos. And, possibly, in 200 years, they will look at us, biological humans of meat and bone, as we look at monkeys. We will be ancient ancestors to them, chained to the gravitational bottom, while they conquer the galaxy. Helium-3 is just a battery that will start the process of transforming Homo sapiens into Homo cosmicus. And this process can no longer be stopped. The machine is launched. Look at the actions of Elon Musk with his Starship. Look at the actions of China. They are all in a hurry. They understand that the window of time is open right now. Whoever manages to seize a bridgehead in the next 20 years will determine the vector of civilization's development for 1,000 years to come. We live in an amazing but scary time when science fiction becomes news. Every rocket launch is not just a show. It is laying another brick in the foundation of this new, cruel, but great world. And here we come to the final conclusion. Why do we need all this? Why risk so much, spend trillions, climb into radiation, cold, and darkness? Maybe it's easier to leave the moon alone, leave it to poets and lovers? No, not easier. Because the essence of humanity is expansion. We cannot sit in the cradle forever. Earth's resources are finite. We are burning the remains of oil. We are ruining the climate. We are getting crowded. Helium-3 and lunar resources are our chance to buy time. It is a chance to clean our planet, cure its ecology, and give it a rest by moving heavy, dirty industry into space. The moon is our first, most important step. It is a sandbox, a training camp where we must learn to live away from home. If we cannot master the moon, which is only 3 days away, we will never reach Mars. We will never go out to the stars. We stand at a historical fork. Either we stay on Earth, fight for the remains of disappearing resources, and slowly fade away as a civilization, or we make a leap, risk everything, but open up the infinite possibilities of the universe for ourselves. Looking at how the new lunar race is flaring up, it seems the choice has already been made. The machine is launched. Rockets are being built. The point of no return has been passed. Now, when you know the whole picture, from the energy treasure to the threat of war, and the transformation of man himself. Look at the moon one more time. It doesn't seem so harmless anymore, does it? It grins coldly at us from there, flashing its craters. It is waiting for us. It knows we will come, and it is ready to use our greed to change us forever. The only question is whether we can cope with this test, or if the moon will become our most expensive graveyard. The USA, China, Russia, India, all players are already at the table. The cards are dealt, the bets are made, and the first round in this game of survival begins right now, while you are watching this video. Thank you for diving into this abyss with me. Don't forget to subscribe, because in the next videos we will analyze even more frightening things that lie further, beyond the orbit of Mars. See you in the future.